This video is brought to you by BetUS Sportsbook and Casino.
Steelers Nation, what is going on? This is episode 102 of the Steeler Culture Podcast, where we break down Pittsburgh Steelers football. And this episode is powered by BetUS Sportsbook and Casino. Today, we'll be talking about how the Steelers cut their roster down to the mandatory 53-man roster by 4 o'clock today. They made the unfortunate cuts. And looking at the roster, it's the initial roster, so clearly this isn't going to be the 53. This isn't going to be the full roster heading into week 1 versus Atlanta. More moves will be coming. More moves should be coming. What specific moves? We'll get into that very shortly. But first, if you guys would like to follow us on social media, everything is in the ticker below as well as in the description box. If you guys would like to listen to the audio version of this podcast, the link to Spotify. We are now on Spotify is in the description box below. Feel free to visit that. And today's podcast is sponsored by BetUS Sportsbook and Casino.
Michael Vick at BetUS.com. Catch an incredible 125% sign-up bonus on your first 3 deposits, plus 10% gambler's insurance. BetUS, my online sportsbook and casino.
125% sign-up bonus on the first 3 deposits, up to $2,000. You guys can take advantage of that and get a new sportsbook for the football season, as the games that matter are just around the corner, man. We're a little more over than a week from the first game kicking off for the 2024-2025 NFL regular season, man. You're talking the fastest payouts in the industry. Like I said, 125% sign-up bonus, up to $2,000 on the first 3 deposits. Fast and easy deposit and withdrawal process, 24/7 personalized service every day, and of course live wagering on all major games, which is a big go for me. So if you guys want to go look for a new sportsbook, BetUS Sportsbook Casino is the answer. Link in the description box below. Today we're going to be looking at the player stats for sacks this upcoming season, especially when in regards to Steelers. Sacks going to be very crucial. Obviously, from Alex Highsmith and TJ Watt. You look at their over-unders, you look at their odds, they are very favorable. Alex Highsmith had 7 sacks last year along with 2 interceptions, so you can see he makes plays everywhere. But 7.5 sacks is his over-under odds. If you guys feel confident taking the over, the odds are there, -120. And we'll go all the way down to TJ Watt. Obviously, there's multiple other players you guys can put wagers on if you would like to. But in regards to the Pittsburgh Steelers, we're going to go all the way down to TJ Watt. Over-under is 13.5. I feel like he averages 13.5 every single season. Probably more than that. So both of those odds I feel like are very favorable. So if you feel confident putting down, let's say 50 for that, and another 50 for that, you guys can win such as much, or you guys can wager more to win even more than that. So you guys feel free to do that. You guys want to copy, you guys want to trail this, again, link in the description box below. Shout out to BetUS for sponsoring today's podcast episode. Just please gamble responsibly. All right, now let's get into the initial 53-man roster for this year's Pittsburgh Steelers. Today was the deadline at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and they cut the roster down to 53 like they had to. So getting into the cuts, we're not going to go into all of them, but we're going to go into the more notable names that were cut by the team. Yeah, not just cuts, but they even placed a couple guys on IR. Yes, they did. Some designated to return. Some of them, unfortunately, out for the rest of the year. Two of them specifically. Both of their rookie seasons are sadly over. That includes rookies Ryan Watts and Julius Welshoff. Welshoff, we'll start with him. He had 2 sacks in the last preseason game, 3 altogether throughout preseason. And we had him on our initial 53-man roster predictions.
Yeah. And he was a very impressive guy. He's an international player coming into the NFL. And, you know, he was working his way towards the roster, and he was looking really good. But unfortunately, in that last preseason game, he sustained an injury that will take him out for the whole rookie season for him.
Yeah, not just him, but Ryan Watts. We thought he looked good as well, working in the box as a safety, looked good in the ground game. And literally right at the end of the game, he suffered an unfortunate injury, and it's a lot worse than they anticipated. It's a lot worse than they feared, and he's out for the season. That's unfortunate because both of these guys are good enough to make the 53 if healthy. We had them both making the 53, and thus now, sadly, their rookie seasons are over, and we won't be able to see them until next preseason, next training camp.
All we can do is hope for a speedy and healthy recovery for them.
Yeah, definitely. They also added offensive lineman Dylan Cook and linebacker Jeremiah Moon, 2 injured reserve designated to return. They can return as soon as after week 4. So those are 2 guys that could have potentially made the roster as the 4th guys at their positions. Like Dylan Cook could have been the 4th offensive tackle. Jeremiah Moon could have been the 4th edge guy, since the Steelers only kept 3 tackles and 3 edge guys. Leal could play the 4th edge guy. We'll get into that shortly. But They should be back after week 4. At least that's the earliest they can return. But those are just some of the other moves they made to trim down their 53. Some of the more noticeable cuts include Kyron Johnson. He was another guy that was pushing a guy like Jeremiah Moon and Welshoff to be the 4th edge piece. He was cut. Thomas Graham was cut. And this is a little surprising to me because we had him on our 53-man roster prediction because we thought they were going to stack the slot position as much as possible, at least until Sutton comes back from suspension. But he was cut. He was the guy that was getting all of the first-team slot reps towards the tail end of training camp and preseason. And he was cut.
Nope.
Beanie Bishop made it over him. So Thomas Graham was cut. John Reese Plumlee was cut, clearly, because, we already have the 3 quarterbacks. He is a guy that should have a Willy Wonka golden ticket to the practice squad. Without a doubt, his versatility, the Steelers are going to want to keep training him anywhere and everywhere possible. And Des Fitzpatrick was cut. He did not make the roster. He did not make the 53. In fact, they elected to keep Scotty Miller over Des Fitzpatrick.
Yeah, which, I was kind of disappointed in seeing Des Fitzpatrick not make the team. I felt like in every preseason game, he made a big gain, a big play, a great catch. He was really coming to his own as a solid depth wide receiver. And even then, he could have played as a nice special teams gunner because he's pretty good at special teams at the same time. But for some reason, the Steelers opted to go with Scotty Tuhati on the team and decided to let Des Fitzpatrick walk. But I would imagine that they're going to want to keep him back for receiver purposes, for special teams purposes.
It wouldn't be the first time they brought him back to the practice squad. So he could have another ticket there. It's just a little underwhelming because I thought he was going to make it. I thought he did enough to make it. And he didn't. They elected to keep Scotty Miller, probably because he has more return specialist abilities. But getting into the 53 itself, as follows: quarterback, Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, Kyle Allen. Running back, Najee Harris, Jalen Warren, Cordero Patterson. Offensive linemen, we're going to start with the tackles first. We're going to start with Broderick Jones, Dan Moore, and Troy Fatano. Those are the only 3 tackles they kept. Only 3. Again, Dylan Cook could have been the 4th guy if he wasn't placed on IR. He probably should have been the 4th guy, but he'll be back probably after week 4 at the earliest. But only 3 tackles now. God forbid, knock on wood, anything happens to any of our tackles, any of the starters. That includes Dan Moore. Who do you have at tackle? Who do you have as the backup? Spencer Anderson? It's not a good spot, not a good room right there. You only have 3 tackles.
Yeah, it's pretty freaking bare. And Broderick's pretty much the only swing guy that you got.
I would anticipate that to change. That should change, at least until Dylan Cook comes back. They need a better swing guy so that they can stop forcing Broderick to do it and put Broderick back at left. I think we could all agree on that. Tackle depth is incredibly bare. Only 3 tackles. That's it. Guards, they got Mason McCormick, Isaac Seumalo, Spencer Anderson, and James Daniels. Those are your 4 guards. You got your starters, you got your backups. Center, you got Zach Frazier and Ryan McCollum.
So they do keep a second center after Nate Herbig suffered a season-ending injury. Ryan McCollum, he's been with the team for 2 years, primarily as a developmental piece and a practice squad player. But, they definitely had to work on the backup center position for sure. They had to fulfill that.
Right.
Because only having 1 center is just as bad as having 3 tackles. It's very, very bare. Somewhere to happen, we're practically screwed.
Right. Now, it's good that they kept extra bodies in that room particularly because, again, God forbid injuries happen. Steelers are already suffering it, unfortunately. But 9 offensive linemen bodies in that room, which is good. You got to stack it. But I anticipate more to be on the way because, again, tackle is too bare. It is too thin. You cannot allow that to happen heading into week 1. Tight end. They kept 4 tight ends. Pat Frymuth, Darnell Washington, Connor Hayward, and Michael Pruitt, like we expected.
No surprise there.
Arthur Smith is very tight end heavy. He's going to keep as many tight ends as possible. You can anticipate every single one of them to get a decent amount of playing time. And hopefully, targets. Please. Wide receiver, they only keep 5. That includes, of course, George Pickens, Van Jefferson, Calvin Austin III, Roman Wilson, and, like we said, Scotty Miller. We thought they'd keep only 5 to make extra room for an additional tight end in Pruitt or Hayward. They did, but they kept Scotty Miller. That could change. They definitely going to have to add more bodies, or at least a better body at wide receiver.
Yeah, looking at it, outside of Pickens and maybe even Roman Wilson, although we haven't seen him in action yet on the field, outside of those 2, it is terrible.
It is bare. It is just undetermined. There's just not a lot of faith in that group. It's probably one of the weakest positions we have outside of corner. seriously, slot corner specifically.
It's a position that they're going to have to try to look at and fulfill their due diligence at it, which there has been some wide receiver news going about throughout the NFL.
And no, it's not the one that we've been waiting for.
No, it at this point, I don't care what happens. Brandon Ayuk and the Niners, I don't know when it's going to end. Nobody knows when it's going to end.
According to Adam Schefter, we shouldn't expect a trade anytime soon.
Oh, is that the new update?
Yes, finally. Weeks waiting, he finally said, hey, don't expect a trade anytime soon.
Well,
Thanks
if not that, the Steelers can't hang their hat on that.
No.
And they can't hold on to it for too long because I feel like they've been very patient with that situation.
Yeah,
And they can't rely on whenever that's going to end because we don't know when that's going to end. So the Steelers are going to have to go out and look at other options and do their due diligence.
Yeah, and we thought they were going to make a trade for a receiver. Like John Mechie was being tossed around. I think he would have been a solid piece, a great opportunity for him. He's staying in Houston.
For now.
Tim Patrick of the Broncos was getting trade calls. They eventually elected to cut him, and he signed him with the Lions practice squad.
Yeah, so that option's out the door.
So we thought they would make a move or some sort before the 53. That did not happen. But, of course, a move will happen after the 53 because it's a necessity.
Now, before we move on, I want to talk about one more wide receiver at least, and that's a fellow Texan that's no longer a Texan. Noah Brown was released by the Texans. That I was very surprised to hear early this morning because I feel like when Tank Dell went down last year, Noah Brown is one of those guys that stepped up and just had great chemistry with C.J. Stroud and was just a big playmaker. And he's a guy that's got great size, great speed. He's a willing blocker. He's actually a very good blocker at his position.
And he hasn't only showed that in Houston last year, but, of course, Dallas.
Yeah, he has.
He had multiple years in Dallas showing his dependability as a depth guy when his name was called. Yeah, I think the Steelers should absolutely put a waiver claim on him.
Yeah, now he's not a number 2. Anybody out there that they could pick up in a waiver claim, in a trade, or free agency, there's no wide receiver 2s out there, okay?
No.
I want to throw that out there.
No, the wide receiver 2 the Steelers have going forward is Van Jefferson or until Roman Wilson proves himself.
But if they can find somebody that could bring a better skill set than what we have right now at wide receiver, I'll take it.
Go for it.
Because quite frankly, we need it.
Yes,
we
do.
absolutely need it.
Yes, we do. We can anticipate something like that in the coming days, and I think Noah Brown's probably the best option right now. It really is. Moving on to the defense. Defensive line, just like offensive line, they kept 9 defensive linemen. They kept everybody possible. That includes, of course, Cameron Hayward, Larry Ogunjobi, Keanu Benton as your starters, Montravius Adams, Dean Lowry as your veteran backups, Isaiah Loudermilk, Logan Lee even made it, and DeMarvin Leal. Good for Leal. He proved himself. He had himself a very, very good camp in preseason, man, showing his burst, how thin he is. And
no, he stepped up big time, and he also showcased his versatility.
Yeah, and I was very surprised to see Logan Lee made it because he was kind of stomped down, and obviously a very deep defensive line group. There's 8 guys in front of him. But he still made the list. He still made the roster.
I think a big part of that is because they use a draft selection on him, and he's a guy that they're going to want Carl Dunbar, our defensive line coach, to work on to try to get the best out of him, see where he fits best alongside that defensive line, and just a guy that they don't want to let go because he could be a decent guy down the road as a decent depth piece for the future.
Yeah, you got to look at life after Loudermilk, after Lowry, after Leal, right? After guys like that. That's going to be Logan Lee. So thus they kept him on the roster. 9 defensive linemen. I don't anticipate that remaining heading into week 1. It could. It very well could. And the reason I say that is because you look at the linebacking group. You look at the edge group. They only kept 3 edge guys. TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, and, of course, Nick Herbig. Only 3 edge guys, which means the 4th guy could be DeMarvin Leal. He has that versatility. He showed he can definitely play it. He can make an impact. He can make plays in that area. He was always in the backfield. He was always ahead of the line of scrimmage in the ground game during preseason, man. He really stepped up. So he could play edge. He could be that 4th edge guy. So technically 9 defensive linemen could be 8 if they move Leal to edge. Now, Leal won't make the full move to edge. Like, he won't play only edge, but that's probably what we see a lot of time there. So if you want to look at it, yeah, 4 edge guys, including Leal, and 8 defensive linemen if you really want to dumb it down that way. So a decent way to look at it. But, yeah, TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, Nick Herbig are your edge guys. Inside linebacker, Patrick Queen, Atlanta Roberts, Peyton Wilson, Tyler Matakavich, and Mark Robinson to no one's surprise.
Yeah.
Very stacked linebacking group. And that's with Cole Holcomb still on the PUP list. He'll be on the PUP list at least for the first 4 weeks. More than likely more than that.
Yeah.
No one knows his prognosis.
No.
But when he gets back, man, if he comes back this year, that linebacking group, it gets even more juicy. It gets more strong, dude. It's crazy.
Even more of a boost.
I feel like every single linebacker we have on the roster can make plays anywhere. And that includes Matakavich, that includes Mark Robinson. They can make plays anywhere. It's a great trait to have. And for once, we have a linebacking group we can be proud of. Cornerback, this is very concerning. Only 5 corners. 5. Joey Porter Jr., Dante Jackson are your starters. Beanie Bishop, the undrafted rookie out of West Virginia, he made it. Good for him. Good for him. He's probably going to be the slot corner because Thomas Graham got cut, so he's probably the starting nickel guy.
Well, honestly, looking at the roster at the moment, there's nobody else really.
Nobody.
Well, primarily at the cornerback position. There is nobody else outside of Beanie Bishop that is a primarily slot option.
Right. And the other guys that made it are Darius Rush and Corey Trice. Good for Corey Trice. You know, out of all the injuries that they suffered at the end of preseason, all the guys they added to IR to trim down to 53, thankfully Corey Trice made it through, and he's obviously healthy enough, and he'll be ready week 1. And he's going to be, I would imagine, the primary sub-package guy, at outside guy. He'll probably be the primary outside cornerback depth guy, the number one, if anything happens to JPJ or Dante Jackson. And he'll see a lot of significant playing time in dime packages as a dime backer. Darius Rush made it. I didn't think he would because I thought Ryan Watts was going to make it. Unfortunately, he's on IR for the rest of the season. So Darius Rush makes it. He makes a spot. Good for him. But still, cornerback is thin. Slot corner is incredibly thin. They're going to have to add extra bodies. If
They got to figure something out.
I'd be shocked if they don't. I'd actually be frustrated if they don't. They need people. They need pieces there.
No, because until Sutton comes back after the bye week, we only have one guy. That's Beanie Bishop.
That's it.
Now, I don't know who else is out there. I seen that former Steeler Desmond King got released by the Texans.
And he's a guy that should have played the slot position last year. Remember, we had him on the roster, and all he did was play return specialist.
All he was a healthy scratch and a guy that could fill in for Gunner if he was hurt or if he stuck up the joint, which 9 times out of 10 he did.
Even though the Steelers cut him, he goes back to Houston, and he makes plays on the defense.
And in the slot, by the way.
So
primarily in the slot.
So could the Steelers redeem themselves and bring back Steeler legend Desmond King? I hope so, because they need bodies. They need someone with versatility. They need someone that can make plays in that area. He's the guy that can do it. I would do it in a heartbeat. He's a little familiar with the system. They didn't play him.
And just a guy that can fill that position for the first half of the year until Sutton comes back. And when Sutton comes back, you can use Sutton and King in the slot.
Right.
Have them split reps and whatnot.
I would.
Just bolster the secondary a little bit right there. I mean, I'm not going to hate that. I'm not opposed to it.
No.
Just whatever it takes to bolster the slot position, because having Beanie Bishop be the starter, I mean, you're having Beanie Bishop, who's an undrafted rookie free agent. I mean, you're putting all your effort and responsibility at that position in him.
Yeah, and he was a guy that played only 2 preseason games, eventually got first-team reps taken from him with Thomas Graham. And in preseason, he didn't look that great.
No, and I don't know about you guys, but I don't have my full confidence in Beanie Bishop holding down that position.
No, so either he's just going to be the nickel starter in terms of like rundowns, because that's where he works best. He works best around the line of scrimmage, working in the ground game with his tackling ability. That's what he does best, right? Kind of reminds me of Arthur Millette a little bit. You know, Arthur Millette wasn't the best cover guy, but boy, could he play in the ground game? Could he blitz? It's kind of what Beanie Bishop reminds me of. So perhaps they use him more so as a run defender, as the obvious run plays, and then when it comes to passing downs, third down conversions and stuff like that, then they play a lot more dime, where Corey Trice comes in as the dime. They move Casey to the slot or Elliott to the slot and Casey up top. Just an idea. It's probably something they might exercise, but yeah, I mean, another body they could bring back and to their system is James Pierre. I know we've seen enough of James Pierre. He's very inconsistent. He left for the Commanders and didn't make the 53, but that's someone that is incredibly familiar with Terrell Austin's system, with the Steelers defense, And they need a gunner on special teams as well at that position.
Yeah, and that's I'm not opposed to Pierre coming back, but that would be the only reason I would bring him back, because I would not take that opportunity away from Trice as the primary backup cornerback. I would not take that away from him.
No, Trice has earned that. But if you want to bring back Pierre as extra bodies, as extra outside depth, and of course special teams gunners, yeah, he'd be cheap as hell. And he's very familiar with the system. It's not the first time the Steelers would bring back people that are familiar with their system after the 53. They did it years past. So I wouldn't be surprised if they do that as well. So Desmond King's an option. James Pierre's an option. I'll just throw those guys out there. At safety, they kept they kept 5 safeties. Minka Fitzpatrick, Deshaun Elliott, DeMonte Casey, Miles Killebrew, and Jalen Elliott.
Now, Jalen Elliott made it. I was actually surprised to see that a guy like Jalen Elliott made it. I know he looked pretty decent in special teams. As far as a depth guy and a cover guy, he didn't really stand out to me.
But he's here clearly for special teams. And yes, he made plays in special teams. So perhaps they could have kept an extra body in the cornerback room instead of keeping Elliott. But clearly they value Elliott's special teams ability, and that's a good thing for him. That's how he made the roster. Those are how players like that are going to have to make the roster, and that he did. So props to Jalen Elliott. And that's where they're going to view him. You know, I don't know if he'll stay on the roster for the long term, but
he could be a guy that could just reserve a roster spot until the Steelers bring somebody in for another position, whether that's wide receiver or tackle or cornerback, right, or edge possibly. You know, he could just be a guy that's just reserving a spot for someone.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, because again, the initial 53 is never the final 53 heading into week 1. So, you know, it's just the nature of the beast. It's the business, and of course, the special teams guys are Boswell, Cameron Johnson, and Christian Kuhn. So that is the initial 53. So some notes here, 9 offensive linemen, 9 defensive linemen, only 3 tackles, only 5 receivers, 4 tight ends, only 3 edge pieces. Again, Leal could be the 4th. Only 5 corners. So clearly moves are going to have to be made. Moves will be made. They are imminent. We should expect it, whether that's via waiver claims, whether that's via trades, you know. In the coming days, that will be told. That story will be told. But most importantly, receiver, please, for the love of God, because we need bodies. Like Rob stated, whoever they bring in isn't going to be the number 2. Unless they make a blockbuster trade, they aren't going to be the number 2. Whoever they bring in, if they bring in anybody, which they should, they will just be an improvement in depth, which is a good thing because Lord knows we need it. Mm-hmm. Tackle. We just need an extra tackle piece, at least before Dylan Cook gets back. We just need someone else in that room. We do. We can't rely on just 3 guys and then Spencer Anderson as the emergency option. Just not a good way to look at it. Cornerback, we need extra bodies. We mentioned Desmond King. We mentioned James Pierre. I don't know who else could be out there that they could bring in. Maybe a Sean Wade. I know the Steelers looked at him heavily coming out of Ohio State, and he had his best year in college as a slot guy.
That's an option.
I'll throw him out there as a slot weapon maybe. Maybe they put him on the practice squad. Just going to throw it out there. And I'd say maybe safety if they want to bring in extra bodies. And the reason I say that is because Terrell Edmonds is a free agent. Yes, Terrell Edmonds. Listen, I'm not saying sign him to the 53. What I'm saying is sign him to the practice squad.
You could do that.
He is incredibly familiar with the system, and in case of anything, injuries or whatnot, which is just, you know, it's an inevitability. You can't avoid it. Things could happen. You have someone that is very comfortable, very familiar with Terrell Austin, very familiar with Mike Tomlin, and very familiar with a lot of players on the defense.
Yeah. Honestly, you know what? Edmonds out there. I'm not opposed to Edmonds coming back. I never was, especially right now. He could play as the primary backup safety to not only Elliott, but maybe even Minka, because he has some free safety experience since he left the Steel City. If you wanted to,
He could play dimebacker.
he absolutely could. I think he's done it before. Play in the box or whatnot.
Yes.
Again, very familiar. Now, I'm just spitballing here. I'm not saying this should happen. I'm not saying that this could happen. I'm just spitballing an idea here because thinking more about the slot cornerback position, whether they bring back Desmond King or not, or if they don't bring back another piece and they just only have Beanie Bishop at the slot cornerback position.
Right.
Another player that they could move down there that we've mentioned several times could get the opportunity at the slot because he has the frame, he has the play style, he has the ball hawking ability, and just the work ethic as a slot cornerback, DeMonte Casey.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, I mean, ever since he came to The Steelers, I mean, his first season, I mean, wherever the ball was, he was. Like, he was a very contributive player. But then last year, he was a co-starting safety alongside Keanu Neal, and he just didn't look good at the strong safety position.
No, like, he made plays where the ball was. He's just a little bit of a insignificant tackler. But I think in the slot, yeah, he has experience there. And I see what you're saying. The lack of a true slot corner or just the less of numbers in that room, they can move him down there and then bring back Edmonds to fill Casey's spot.
Yeah, that way you still have 4 safeties, right? Say Elliott gets cut for Edmonds, right? Then you got Minka, Edmonds, or Minka, Elliott. I'm used to them being the duo. Minka, Elliott, Edmonds, and Miles Killebrew as your 4 safeties.
With Casey
as that 5th, but you can move him down, kind of like you said about Leal being that 4th edge piece, that 4th outside linebacker. Casey could be a slot cornerback. He could be listed as the nickel cornerback.
Right.
You know, just to fill in that position. I'm not saying he's going to fulfill it or he's going to be a dynamic player at the position.
We just need extra bodies.
I'm just saying have him fill that position until Sutton comes back.
Yes.
That way you bring Edmonds back, you put Casey down there, you're bolstering the secondary a little bit, and you're fulfilling pretty much every position right there. Right there and then.
Now, I know the Jags might want to bring him back to the practice squad if no one signs him to 53, but we're just throwing it out there. You know, again, it's not the first time the Steelers have brought back familiar names after the 53.
Hell, speaking of familiar names, this guy just came to thought. Eric Rowe. Remember last year when he came in and did real well?
Right.
He has not had any involvement or any activity with any team, not even the Steelers, throughout the offseason. I'm surprised they didn't bring him back after when he came in as a practice squad guy, as a veteran. You know, he fulfilled his role very well.
Right.
I figured they'd bring him back as a depth piece. They still could. He's still out there. Maybe he's another option. If not Edmonds, maybe they look into Eric Rowe.
I could see it.
You know, maybe Tomlin and Khan still have a one speed dial. Like, hey, Rowe, you know, why don't you come back to the Steel City? You know, we could really use your contributions and whatnot, right?
Right.
You know, just options out there, you know?
No, I actually very
just
much
spitballing.
I very much like all those options. So we'll see what the Steelers do in the coming days because moves are coming. They're inevitable. It's just a matter of what exactly those moves will be. I'm very excited to see what they are because there are still some holes on the roster, and I expect the Steelers to improve on that before we head into Week 1 versus Atlanta. But if there's any other names you guys want to put in the comments, feel free to do that. Any other names you think the Steelers should bring in, feel free to let us know. But some of the names that pop to us immediately are Noah Brown for receiver, James Pierre, maybe Desmond King at safety or at corner, Edmonds at safety. Just throwing some names out there. Some familiar and some that would definitely be improvements at those positions. Well, let us know your guys' thoughts down below, man. How you guys feel about the 53? Any other positions you think need boosted? Anyone else you think the Steelers should trade or sign or put a waiver claim on? Let us know in the comments below. Love to hear your guys' opinions. Otherwise, huge shout out to BetUS sponsor today's podcast episode. Again, link in the description box below. If you guys are looking for a new sports book this season, take advantage of that 125% sign-up bonus on your first 3 deposits. It's up to $2,000. Shout out to BetUS Sportsbook and Casino for sponsoring today's podcast episode. Shout out to you guys for watching episode 102 of the Steeler Culture Podcast. See you in the next one, and here we go, Steelers.
And as always, like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you later. Peace!